thank you so much for being here this evening, truly. This is the volunteer management training, and we have folks from a variety of different backgrounds here. Thank you from the neighborhood people who are here, our senior center representatives, fire department? No? Emergency communications. Okay, thank you, John. New residents. Oh my gosh, so excited. Neighborhoods. Thank you. With that, I'm going to pass things over to Jan Burrell, who's with 501 Commons. And I can't say much more off the top of my head about 501 Commons. Typically, I'd have a little cheat sheet, but I've worked at agencies that have found a lot of value in working directly with 501 Commons on nonprofit wage surveys and a variety of other issues. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Jan. If you get cold, especially this table, would you just let me know? We'll shut it. Okay, great. And with that, Jan, it's all you.
Thank you.
And I'm Mallory. I don't know, I've met you all now, but my name's Mallory Van Abma. I work as the Community Opportunities Coordinator here at the City of Shoreline. So I have the great pleasure of doing things like this and neighborhood programs and a variety of other programming. So thank you.
Thank you, Mallory, and thanks to the City of Shoreline for having me here today. As she mentioned, I am Jan Burrell. I'm the Consulting Services Manager at 501 Commons, and I think I have an official slide for that. I will say that I am not used to being filmed either, so you are not alone if you're feeling a little self-conscious. We'll get through this together, but glad that folks who aren't here today can learn about volunteer management. And I will just say that volunteer management is often one of those under-resourced roles within an organization. It's oftentimes other duties as assigned on top of already very, very full plates. I see Kevin beaming in front of me. And so I just want to echo Mallory that thank you for making the time to be here tonight. I think our community benefits when people can make more time for volunteer engagement and figure out ways to make it just a little bit more intentional and consistent for the volunteers. So we all kind of benefit when we invest in it. So I appreciate you making time to be here today. So a little bit about me. I had a few people ask about my background and what landed me in this role, and I haven't thought about that in a while. I've been at 501 Commons for 12 years, a very long time in my world. A good percentage of my life, I think, at this point. But we are a nonprofit that exists to support other nonprofits. And what that means is that we offer a ton of free information and referral services. There's a lot of tools and templates and kind of general overviews on our website about most nonprofit administration themes. So we've got volunteer management and fundraising and governance and strategic planning and taxes and all the things. And so we're a good first stop shop to most management support needs that your organization may have, either now or in the future. I have a wonderful colleague, his name is Greg. I would like to get him a phone number that says 1-800-CALL-GREG because he knows a little bit about all things nonprofit administration, and he's just a wealth of expertise and patience and grace and can take the time to hear what your needs are and what your questions are and point you in the right direction so that you don't have to spin your wheels trying to figure out where to start. So after the session, I will send some information to Mallory, and I'll include his information and the pertinent links on our website where you can go to request time with an expert to talk about whatever issue it is that you're worried about, or information about more services if you so desire. So that's a little bit about 501 Commons. So before that, I was at Seattle Works and connecting people in their 20s and 30s into the community. So I was trying to figure out how to get people inspired to volunteer, and I would recruit them. And then I would also turn to nonprofit organizations and recruit them and say, hey, I've got these groups of volunteers that want to be social and help your organization. What can they do? And so there was a lot of expectation management on both sides of the equation. And that segued into me working at 501 Commons and engaging pro bono consultants in working with nonprofit organizations. So been doing a bit of consulting related to volunteer management along the way, and that brings me to here today. So thanks for joining us this evening and giving me the chance to talk. So there's a lot to volunteer management, and my value system around this is that it's not actually rocket science. It's, I think, there's a tipping point where your natural instincts to be engaging and supportive and responsive to your constituents when you have so many people involved, that natural instinct kind of takes a back seat to all the things of life, right? You get busy. It's harder to be intentional and consistent. And so it helps to have a framework or start having some policies and processes to make it easier for you to consistently be intentional with your volunteers and cultivate their involvement and follow up with them and recognize them and all those good things. And so there's a lot of different ways to do it. And so my goal for today is to outline some of those healthy practices of volunteer engagement. Even if you just have them in the back of your mind, it will help you be a little bit more intentional and just recognize what you're doing as you're naturally doing it, as you're having conversations. And then as you have more volunteers or more people are involved in your volunteer program, you can start building some of the tools like formal position descriptions or whatever the case may be. So you're probably not going to walk away internalizing all of this, but my goal is to just encourage you that it doesn't have to be huge. You can start small. It can be little things that you do and build upon over time. But again, just having an idea of what we're talking about is kind of the first step toward building a volunteer program. So first, we've talked a little bit about the volunteer opportunities within your organizations. I just want to ask the question, who are our volunteers?
We've got mostly homeowners.
Homeowners.
We've got mostly retired, people with time.
Yep. Retirees, people with time. High school students who want that experience or are required to volunteer. Yes. Anyone you can get to drink the Kool-Aid. Amen. Absolutely. Essentially, anyone is a potential volunteer if they are willing to be engaged within your organization, if they will choose to volunteer with your organization. And so that's something to keep in mind. It sounds like most people in this room are doing a good job of keeping those opportunities in the back of their heads or even the forefront of their heads as they're having conversations to inspire people to want to take action within your organization. And so the trick with that is that once people are inspired to get involved with your organization, you want them to have a good experience. You're defeating your purpose if they come in, it's not a good fit, they don't feel supported, they're not inspired by what they do, and then you lose them. It's the leaky bucket syndrome, right? You bring a bunch of people in, but if you're losing them all at the bottom, it's defeating your purposes. It's more negative PR than it is positive will for your organization. And so as volunteer managers, we want to figure out how not to just bring these people in, but how to make sure that they have a good experience. So the community, our association members, people at large are potential or prospective volunteers. What about, I think a lot of people in this room have events. So obviously we have volunteers at events. We have project leads. Can they be volunteers? Yeah. And what about board members? Sometimes we forget that board members are also volunteers, and we need to be kind to our board members. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But would anyone be interested in reading this? It's just a good quote to kind of keep in mind. You're going to read it for me? No? Okay.
The volunteer part's easy. It's getting their heads wrapped around the donor part. So a lot of times it's very easy to get somebody to give you their time. But organizations don't only run on people's time.
Right.
It takes money.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's a tough switch in the brain.
It is, but research has shown that if a volunteer has a good experience and they're deepening that relationship with your organization and you explain to them why you need money, what that money goes to support, they are more inclined to give to your organization than someone not personally connected or that doesn't have a personal experience with your organization. So anyone entering your organization, no matter the motivation, is a potential long-term volunteer and or a donor if they have a positive experience. One thing I like to keep in mind about volunteerism is that it's not completely altruistic. There should be something in it for everyone, and there's all kinds of reasons why people sign up to volunteer, even if they're mandated by a court or a high school requirement. They're still choosing to comply with that. Even if mom tells them to do it, they're still choosing to honor mom's request. In order to meet people where they're at and to make sure that they not only want to volunteer, but they want to continue volunteering with your organization, again, it's good to be mindful that they're needing something out of it. There's a lot of different motivations or reasons why someone might want to show up and contribute on behalf of your organization. And so if we recognize that and get to know our volunteers and work to understand their motivations, the better equipped we are to be able to identify what opportunities they might be interested in, or what messaging might appeal to them in terms of selling them on your particular volunteer opportunity, or how they might want to be recognized. And so what we're trying to do here is putting ourselves into more of a volunteer-centric mindset. I think oftentimes we go into things, I'm a volunteer, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, come work with me on this. But you're talking to a human that has intrinsic needs, and it should be a partnership. We should be getting to know our volunteers and understanding what compels them to action and what they want out of the experience so that they can be fulfilled and want to continue volunteering on behalf of your organization. Does that sound okay to folks? Does that make anyone curdle?
I feel like another bullet point could be to have a sense of like a purpose.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, we found that a lot of people offer or stand up to volunteer for the first time or out of the blue because there's been a fundamental change in their life. People have retired, their kids have gone off to college, they're at a job for a little while, but looking to re-identify their identity and their priorities and opportunities within life.
The loneliness epidemic.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's interesting, though, because we have heard from a lot of organizations that the pre-pandemic volunteers haven't come back. I think a lot of people's priorities changed during the pandemic, and the values around how they serve and where they serve and who they serve may have changed. And so it's good to keep your finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on with your volunteers and what may be changing for them so that you can understand how to stay ahead of that curve and continue to offer different opportunities to them or have that pipeline of new volunteers in anticipation of transitions. So thank you. Okay, so just to kind of get us in this mindset of putting ourselves in the shoes of volunteers, we look to McClellan's theory of social motivators. It's not obviously the only social theory out there, but it's one that is particularly adept at helping us understand volunteers. We're talking about social motivations and why people may show up to do the things that it is that we want them to do, right? And so McClellan did a bunch of research and learned that people, as a result of their life experiences and the culture that they've been immersed in, they developed needs, these social motivation needs that would somehow influence how they showed up in different social situations or professional settings down the road. And so if we try to understand what those motivations are, you might be able to see some of the personalities that come out in your volunteer base. And the reason we look at them is, again, to try to have some sort of framework for understanding why people come to us, how they may be showing up, and what their needs are. These are needs that they're looking to fulfill by coming to your organization and expressing interest in being of service within your organization. So he recognized that people tended to fall into one of three categories. We are we are dynamic individuals. Nobody likes to be put in a box. We are all different things at all different moments. But oftentimes in any given situation, we may identify with one thing more versus another. So it's just a way of being able to name some of those needs and how they may show up throughout your organization. So the first one is achievers, people that are focused on personal growth. Maybe they are wanting to learn new skills or wanting to make an impact, but they're pushing themselves to get to get to the next step and to feel good about their accomplishments. And so they enjoy taking risks, being innovative, creative. They are really focused on the task. Like to be independent and figure things out themselves. They don't necessarily want to be told how to do things. They want to be given a challenge and or given the ball so that they can run with it. So our achievers, does anybody have an idea of what kind of role might be well suited for an achiever? A leader, yeah, who can help everyone else kind of figure out how to get something done.
Someone who creates programs?
A program developer, yep, absolutely, yeah.
We have a chief technology officer experienced with Amazon, who's just pushing the limits all the time.
Yeah, goal.
Big benefit.
Goal-oriented. We had thank you for that. We have a good example, I think it was Food Lifeline, which may still be pretty close up here, unless they've moved over the years. But there was an example their volunteer manager told about how a corporate group came in and at one point in time they were told exactly how to package the rice or beans or something and walked through the entire process. And a corporate group said, actually, we want the team building experience. And so give us the goal. We are going to figure out how we achieve that goal and how to do it better and faster. And it ended up being this super fulfilling, challenging activity for the group that they bonded over and ended up packaging more food than most of the other groups that had been there prior. So it's just a good example of playing to strengths. If you know that an individual is coming to you wanting to achieve things, you probably don't want to lay on heavy in terms of orientation, or yes, orientation, but maybe not lay on thick in terms of training. Give them a goal and freedom to achieve that goal, and maybe even some measurements along the way in terms of how they can make sure that they're making progress and overachieving that goal. Thank you. The next one is affiliation. So people who are wanting to connect, they're wanting to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They are wanting to engage with humans and to have that fulfillment. Does anyone have an idea of opportunities that may be good for people who are more socially motivated? What was that? Oh, the pub idea. Sure, yes, absolutely. Come to happy hour. Engage with people at happy hour. Or do a group activity. Or be a part of a special event where you are, working with a team of people. Yeah, that's great. And then our last one are our influencers, people that like to be advisors. They like to be able to influence how things are done or influence the outcome of things. They make good board members, they make good advisory members, but they're a little bit more of our thinkers and advisors than our doers. Does anybody, other than board members, does anybody have ideas of where you might be able to engage an influencer?
City policies?
City policies, absolutely. You need an influencer for your seniors and your volunteer advocates, absolutely. Yeah. So again, this isn't an exact science, but it's just to get us in the habit of really asking the question when our volunteers come to us, what's motivating you to be here? How do you like to learn? How do you like to work? What are you wanting out of this? How do you want to be recognized? I see a lot of organizations spend a ton of time and money on big recognition of events or the fancy token or whatever it is. And oftentimes people just want to be personally thanked. They want to be seen for the contributions that they uniquely provide. They don't need the stuff that's going to sit on the shelf. But you don't know that unless you ask. And so if you take time to get to know your volunteer and what's going to make them thrive, you will be better as an organization because you'll be able to find a good fit for them in terms of a role and how to work and engage that person overall. Does that make sense? Okay. I always feel like I'm going out on a limb by putting people in a box, and it makes me a little skittish. I don't like doing that, but it's just to get us in the habit of thinking about where people are coming to us from. Okay. So this is the gist of our program today, is looking at the cycle of volunteer engagement. We used to call it a life cycle, but there's no death here. In fact, a positive outcome is that people will go through this cycle and they'll have a positive experience and they'll learn and you'll learn and they will maybe sign up for the same thing or maybe they'll do something else within your organization. But if you can get them through the cycle and have these natural touch points throughout their involvement, maybe it's on an annual basis, maybe it's every 6 months, whatever's natural for their role within your organization. Pause, see how things are going, and ideally find something else that they can do within your organization. Maybe instead of sorting the seeds, maybe they become a leader or champion a crowdfunding campaign for Give Big or whatever it is, kind of move them toward that donation piece of it if you can. But essentially, we start with the mission and purpose of the organization and what your plans are for the organization. And I say start with that because I think as nonprofit professionals or volunteers, it's the same thing, we often are so grateful for people coming to us, wanting to give of their time and energy, that we want to engage them in whatever way that they want to be engaged. We don't want to say no. The answer is yes, right? And I know I just said, yes, be volunteer-centric. And I'm intentionally shifting now with the counter-proposal to start with the organization first, to look at your mission and your vision and why it is that you exist there in the first place, and what your priorities are for the coming year. What are the plans that you have already, as an organization, agreed to? And what are the opportunities within that a volunteer can do? It's not that you can't adjust to a volunteer that wants to do something different, but if it's a major pivot, you need to pause and ask yourselves, am I detracting from the mission or am I supporting the mission? Is it yes, but not right now? Is it let's look at this in 6 months, whatever the story is. But the best you can do to be clear on why the organization exists in the first place and what the volunteers are there to help you do. What is it that will really provide the most value to the organization in terms of delivering on your mission? So kind of start with yourself. That will empower you to sometimes say no, which is an okay thing. I think, again, we shy away from saying no, but I'd like to say that by saying yes, if it's not a good fit for the organization, either because of the activity or the skill set or the role, whatever it is, you're going to waste their time, you're going to waste your time, and it ends up being bad PR on behalf of the organization, which is self-defeating. So in this case, it is in your best interest to say no if no is really the right answer. So you start with that, kind of your goals, your vision, your plan for the year, and again, think about how you want to engage volunteers within that. It is great if leadership intentionally thinks through, how do we want volunteers to support us in these efforts? How can we augment staff? How can we create a better experience or opportunity for our clients, and have that be a partnership? I think sometimes staff can feel threatened by volunteers. But if you engage staff in having the conversations, how can volunteers make my work more impactful or more efficient or effective in some way, shape, or form? You can start to think a little bit more broadly in terms of what volunteers can do within your organization. And then you get into the nitty-gritty details in terms of how you manage a volunteer program. You're going to start thinking about marketing and recruitment. We'll go into the details about that. Screening and placement, orientation and training, supervision and recognition, and then that evaluation piece. It's just as much asking for feedback about your volunteer program as it is giving the volunteer an opportunity to reflect and learn about their performance within the organization and getting that professional development opportunity. And again, ideally going back through the cycle. So I'm gonna keep going here. Any questions about that at a high level? We're gonna talk a little bit more about each of those in detail, but okay. So we talked a little bit about planning. So I just want to beg the question, if you had all the money you needed to support your organization, would you still engage volunteers? Yes. Why?
Because they're part of the community and you really need community support.
Yes.
It's everyone.
Absolutely. The issues oftentimes that we're dealing with are bigger than us. We need a force of people that will advocate for the causes that we exist to support. And those causes are apt to live on past our organization. And so we need community volunteers to be advocates, to care, to work together. Sometimes the work is bigger than us. Any other reasons why we would still engage volunteers?
Someone might know someone might know someone who could make actually something happen.
Connections?
Yes, connections.
Yep. Having ambassadors, I guess,
Yeah.
on behalf of the organization.
I would say corporate funding.
Yep. Yep, good in terms of fundraising. Yep. Yep. I had a thought and it went out of my brain, so it'll come to me in a moment. Oh, perception. There's also something, there's something different about having a paid staff member do something versus someone doing it. We've already talked about it not being entirely altruistic, but still, they have a different motivation for being there and for giving of themselves. And sometimes a client can receive that gift of generosity just a little bit differently than they can a volunteer, from a volunteer than they can a staff member. And so, yeah, don't underestimate the value of just the perception of someone showing up to give of themselves without an ulterior motive. They're not getting a paycheck to do that work. So sometimes it can just be received a little bit differently than paid staff. What's that?
Ask how many people have paid staff in here.
I mean, that is a fair question. How many people have paid staff? I know the senior center, maybe the only one. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
just to clarify, that's all.
No, it's true. It's true.
Meetings and it's like looking around the room, everybody's paid their fee, and it's like, dude, you guys have no clue about how volunteers work.
And it's harder because then it's like everyone's overworked, right? We're all volunteers kind of struggling to keep our heads above water. And so remind me to touch on that because well, I'll just say it now before I forget. One of the things that I say to organizations where they have boards that are considered working boards, I mean, all boards work, but it's just the types of activities that you're doing, they differ if you have staff. But if you are an all volunteer-based organization, I would recommend that you delineate governance responsibilities from what would, in an ideal world, be staff responsibilities. And it's part of it is a way to have a pipeline of new board members for your organization. If you can break down some of those tasks into small chunks and have easy things for people to do amidst the busyness of life, they feel good about getting involved in your organization. You can get to know them, they can get to know you, and you can start building that relationship and then have them go on to take on leadership roles and maybe ultimately get to a board level position. But you want those board level positions to be something that's reasonable for people to do, just like you want those volunteer tasks or volunteer roles to be something that's reasonable for them to do. It is hard for a human to do both unless you're retired and have no responsibilities. And so it's kind of a self-preservation as well as caretaking of your peers. I would recommend seeing how you can delineate things and break it out so that there's more people at the table versus that small group trying to do everything.
Get them to the table first. We've got a really small group. They can get it.
Yeah.
Have to, or then they would stop.
And they may be scared off by that too, because they see the people sitting around that table doing way more than they could ever aspire to do. And so that's why you go to the pub. I like it. Drink those worries away. I won't talk about this. Does everyone have a mission, a formal mission statement on behalf of their organizations? Okay. The point of this slide is really to help volunteers understand how they're directly impacting that mission, that they are integral to the organization achieving its goals within the organization, that without them it couldn't be achieved. And so organizations that have larger volunteer programs or have staff managing volunteers, it's really good to be intentional about what the organization's philosophy is related to volunteer involvement so that they understand how they show up within this matrix of paid people and unpaid people, what they mean to the organization, what the impact is that they're having, what they can expect of the experience and so forth. And having that philosophy statement or purpose statement for volunteers really helps set the tone throughout the entire organization. Leadership should be involved in terms of setting that tone and reinforce it with staff so that everyone has volunteer management responsibilities. It's not just the volunteer manager. It is everyone. It's the HR team sharing orientation and treating people like they're a part of the team. It's the development team who wants to fundraise from these volunteers. It's the program leads working with volunteers, whether you're a paid program lead or a not paid program lead. Yes?
The question back in your previous one.
Yeah.
You talked about engaging, have you seen that balance?
So I think what I hear you saying is that the mission is very much service focused and doesn't touch on how volunteers are integrated into that. But how do you rephrase that from the volunteer perspective? Is that what you're asking?
Well, how would you do it effectively when we're looking at served agencies reading this mission statement and wondering how my agency going to be served by this, and if we're just supporting volunteers, that's not the point.
Yeah, so if volunteers are a large component of your organization, and so mission statements ideally focus on who you're serving, what your values are around how you serve, what those services are, et cetera. If volunteers are a big part of that, it's great to have that embedded in the mission statement. But what I'm talking about is having a philosophy statement specific to the volunteer program that talks about, okay, here's the mission of the organization and what's our role within that. What can we expect as volunteers? Is it that we're at the table for all the decisions related to the program that we're involved in, or are we, I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but I can send you some examples of different philosophy statements that are specific to the volunteer program that just help staff understand what the expectations are for engaging volunteers, what the expectations are in terms of how they'll be treated, how they're integrated, how often you engage them or don't, if you need to kind of encourage staff to think outside of the box in terms of coming up with volunteer opportunities and things like that.
It's really important because it, frankly, for us, I think it helps us be more disciplined
Yeah.
in how we engage and retain volunteers.
Totally. It goes, and that's why I have it up here, it goes a long way for setting the tone within the organization of that. Yeah.
I have a question. I was curious, you mentioned mission, sorry.
I think you're talking about different ways that volunteers can be celebrated and recognized in different facets of the organization, not just the mission. I mean, the values can augment that. And I agree. And that's the point of this next slide here, is that everyone should really be involved in terms of honoring volunteers and working to engage them in the organization and to make sure that they have a good experience. And I'd say, when you are a volunteer yourself, one of the best things you can do, again, delineating responsibilities so that you're not overburdened, your peers aren't overburdened, but really having conversations around what are our priorities for the coming year. I've touched on this already, but how are we going to make decisions as a team? What are our expectations of how we work together as a group, or how we treat each other? And I think establishing some of those norms, even as volunteers, can make our own experiences better and gives us words to fall back on when things do go awry or someone isn't quite embracing the spirit that the group has established for itself. It's okay to have these be written norms that new people are oriented to, that you're recruiting eyes wide open in terms of what they're getting into and what the expectations are. And then you have something to hold people accountable to if somehow they're consistently not measuring up to treating people respectfully and being inclusive and so forth. So,
Can I say,
sure.
I feel like the mission and value statement should not be set in stone. It should actually serve the current administration. So, I feel like sometimes if the current people don't match the mission statement, then the mission statement should change to what is actually current.
Yeah, it's absolutely. She's absolutely right that mission statements should be reviewed and refreshed. I don't know if I have a recommendation in terms of the right frequency, but definitely going into a strategic planning process, every couple of years, it's a good idea to just look at it together as a group, get everyone on the same page, even just ask the question, do any changes need to be made? Does it still speak to what we're here for? What our values are around who we're serving, how we're serving, what sets us apart as an organization? So it's a great comment. Thank you. Okay, marketing and recruitment. I was going to do a little activity here, but we may skip it just for the sake of time. So one of the best practices, kind of one of the building blocks of marketing and recruitment, is a position description. And it's something that oftentimes organizations skip. It seems like an unnecessary hurdle or just paperwork. But I want to advocate for them a little bit, just because They can be your building block. It is something that you can fall back on. It is something that you can use to do a two-way evaluation at the end of the completed engagement. It helps people know what they're getting into. It's a screening tool to make sure that people have the right skills. They know, they know what skills are going to be required in this position, that kind of thing. And it can also help organizations that are all volunteer-based organizations as roles morph and people take on more and more responsibilities, and all of a sudden that person is no longer available and they move along from the organization. If you update these position descriptions on an annual basis, you somehow keep tabs on kind of what's falling into this person's position. And it's also a good double check. Do I have too much in this person's position? Do we need to kind of shift things or create a new role or get some help with this? But for so many different reasons, it helps, manage engagement and retention. I've seen some organizations have this be kind of a soft agreement between the organization and the volunteer. You recruit, you have a conversation about it, they say yay, you say yay, you've asked questions to make sure they're a good fit for the role. You can talk about, is there anything about this role that you'd want to adjust, and have a two-way conversation, formalize it together. There's a little buy-in that's created there. And then you can have someone sign that position description, that they are agreeing to it. I think just human behavior, there's something about signing off on something that just helps instill that commitment and accountability a little bit more than saying, yeah, Pacific Northwest, I'm going to say yes, but I'm just not going to respond to you for the next 3 months when you try to get a hold of me again. So being intentional about the position descriptions and updating them on a regular basis can go a long way toward preventing issues down the road. Anybody get inspired there?
I don't know for that formal, I was thinking not anywhere near that.
And that's okay, but again, as you feel the need to engage more people, having documentation of what, over the years you're going to accumulate more things that you're just doing. And so having that pause every once in a while to just jot it down and see what all it is that you're doing. And is that reasonable? And again, do you need to kind of offload some of it to someone else? But it helps just in terms of institutional knowledge of what falls where, what's actually happening, what isn't happening, as well as just kind of managing how much you have on individuals' plates, and start looking at all the functions of the organization, not just what one person is doing, but if you have 8 people doing similar things, is there some synergy there across position descriptions? Does it make sense to compartmentalize things in a different way to create more efficiencies? So yeah, it's hygiene. It is a structure that isn't always fun, but can help in terms of just managing your own experience as well as welcoming more people to the table down the road. So we've already talked about how we don't really want to do position descriptions, so I won't go into what's in it. On our website, we have a great toolkit for volunteer management, and it essentially has an overview for all elements of volunteer engagement and has tools and templates to support each. And so I think there's a template for this there. There's also a packet of information that's going to walk you through a little bit of what I'm going to talk about in a minute in terms of recruitment. So I knew at the beginning that many of the associations were interested in recruiting more volunteers, and so I put a little bit more time into this piece of the presentation. And so just kind of wanting to draw attention to 3 different types of recruitment. One is most consistent with marketing. It's warm body recruitment. It's getting the word out about your organization. It is, do you have examples or ideas of what might be kind of your mass warm blanket or warm body, recruitment? It's getting late in the day. We're close. We're not quite there yet. That would be, I'll talk about that one in a minute. We're talking about social media and flyers and newspaper articles, on posting on recruitment platforms. Any way you can get the word out to a mass number of people. It's pretty high level. You don't necessarily have the space or the bandwidth for readers to read about all the details of what you're wanting someone to do, but it's enough to let people know that your organization is out there and that you need volunteers. And so it's a good approach if you need something that the majority of the population can do. You just need a warm body, not a warm blanket. That was weird that I said that. Just a warm body to show up and do. You don't necessarily need someone with deep technical expertise in any particular area, and so forth. So it's just getting the word out as broadly as possible. And then we have our concentric circles, which is word of mouth. The number one reason that people volunteer is because someone asked them to. And so thinking about who you know, what are the circles that you're involved in, what are the circles that your volunteers are involved in, and how can you spread the word amongst your community. And so good tactics in this arena are to have an event where you encourage everyone to bring a friend, or there's a door prize if you bring a friend, or asking people to tell 5 people why they're excited about volunteering at your organization. I mean, I'm sure, anybody have any other ideas about how you'd get people to speak to their circles on your behalf?
Is the social media the warm body?
I'd say social media would be more warm body. It's kind of getting the message out to an unknown audience, just spreading the word as widely as possible. You don't really know who's going to consume that message. You're just kind of dependent upon them finding the message and then being interested in learning more about your organization. And concentric circle, it's really about leveraging relationships and who do you know and who do they know that may be interested in supporting your organization. Totally great if it's appropriate for you to ask clients if they have family members that would be interested in volunteering for your organization, or vendors or sponsors, like you said, that may have a vested interest in the organization. And then you have what is more time-consuming, but often the more effective way of recruitment, and it's called targeted recruitment. I don't necessarily love that terminology, but it shifts to thinking about what it is that you need. Is there a specific role that you need within your organization, and what skills or experiences someone may need to have in order to fulfill that role. And you're starting to work your way backward in terms of understanding what the goal is and how someone could be equipped to fulfill that goal. And then essentially trying to understand their motivations and their interests and where they hang out so that you can get to know these people, cultivate the relationship, and use messaging that might appeal to them. So talking about benefits that may be particularly attractive to this group, or talking about features that may work particularly well for their lifestyle. If you're trying to recruit busy parents, talk about childcare being available, or if you're wanting to recruit seniors, I mean, whatever it is that seniors would be interested in. But it's all about identifying what the strengths are that you need and figuring out who might have those strengths and how do we get to know people in that arena so that we can tailor our messaging to attract them. And I would venture to say that you should also start thinking about how do we, if it's important enough to the organization to engage that particular group or a particular person, that's when you also want to start thinking about how do we tailor our volunteer opportunities to be something that is doable for that particular person. I think I heard someone talking about how do we get renters involved, or how do we get parents that aren't speaking the language, or they're not quite we're having a hard time communicating with these constituents. Well, is there someone that can make a connection to you, or someone that could provide some advice to you in terms of what would be appealing to that audience, what would motivate them to show up, who could translate the information so that you can speak directly to the audience, how do you get the kids involved in terms of bringing messages home and that kind of thing. But understanding who your target audience is based on who you're wanting to bring to the table, or what skills or qualifications you're wanting to bring to the table, and then building those relationships so that you can tailor your opportunities accordingly. Does that make sense? I feel like I got that one twisted up in my head a little bit. So, Rick Lynch, so for a long time, there was like this group of 5 powerhouses of volunteer gurus across the country, and they were all kind of at the same age, and unfortunately, I think most of them have retired and then some at this point. And there hasn't been this next generation of volunteer management leadership to step up and take their shoes. So it says something about the sector, that leadership is needed, and it's hard, right? It's hard. What was that? Oh, you're so kind. That's nice of you. But anyway, I have been to Rick Lynch's trainings, and he's amazing. But he was astute when he said, when you send a message to the community in general, you often wind up speaking to no one in particular. And so again, being specific in your language, the words you're choosing, what you're highlighting, what you're offering, to cater to the people that you're trying to engage. Oh, don't stop on me now. There we go. I think I've talked about this. This just shows it in a more linear form. I think one of the things I'd like to call out is, as you're, if you can have someone that knows the community that you're trying to connect with, if they'd be willing to serve as a sounding board, to just vet your recruitment messaging with them, or to vet the opportunities with them, to make sure that it's something at least enough to start the conversation with people and get them interested. I think it's good to just double check that we're on the right track. We're not being offensive unintentionally, but also learn about what's holding them back from volunteering. What are some of those barriers that we could lower? Again, what are some of those benefits that we could celebrate that may resonate with our audience? Talked about that, I think. Just in terms of marketing, I was reading something today that says that the features of a product never sell anything, the benefits do. And when you're communicating about your volunteer opportunities, really the benefits, people know they want that. You're just trying to communicate that you're just doing something that you already want. You're, again, kind of removing the barriers, making it sound like this is something they can do amidst life. And so obviously you need to have a good understanding about what they can do on top of everything else, and how to articulate it in a way that's going to resonate with your audience.
Just want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Just a new bullet to your slide there.
Please.
That I've heard is called the FBI.
Okay.
It's features, benefits, and why you should do it now. Incentives.
Incentives. Totally. What's in it for me, right?
Well, right now, it's a timing issue, not just benefit, but do it now.
Strike while the iron's hot. No, I'm sure you're right that if people don't act when they're inspired, the likelihood of them taking action later goes down. Yep. And make it easy for them to take action now. Have a phone number ready to go, a human being that they can talk to. I think a lot of organizations end up sending people to an application or a website, and that's going to work for some, and for some it's going to be a deterrent. And so if they can talk to a human, have those conversations, connect with the human, they're going to be more inclined, because they have a hard time saying no, right? If you're talking to an actual human, but you're building that relationship, that the person on the other end of the phone ideally wants to learn about you and your interests and help you meet your goals just as much as the organizations. So thank you for that. 7:15, I think we can go ahead. I don't want to talk at you all night. I'd love for, I know that we have some great experience in the room in terms of doing outreach and trying to get creative in terms of people taking on opportunities within our organizations. So I'd like to just have a few minutes for us to have maybe 2 roundtable conversations, if I could get Kevin and maybe Sarah to go over there. And Natalie to go over this group over here, just so that we have enough at each table. Thank you. I appreciate it. But just talk as a group, maybe what are some of the, and I'll go back to the slide, but some of the approaches that you have found to be effective for your organization, both as the warm body kind of mass recruitment, concentric circles, and targeted recruitment. So how have you gotten the word out in a broad manner? How have you leveraged your relationships to bring more people in? And then how have you personalized your approach to get the specific skills or contributions that you're looking for? And just see if we can come up with some ideas that I haven't thought of or shared, and help each other find more volunteers. Yeah, yeah. The questions. Oh, you know, I don't have them written down. I'm sorry. I can, maybe 10 minutes. Okay. I love that everyone is engaging in conversation. I don't think we need to take too much time of me talking at you after this, and hopefully you'll have a little bit more time to talk to each other at the end. But if anybody does want to get out of here before it's dark, we'll go ahead and keep going. So would someone at this group, I know there were some questions around how to engage younger volunteers, and you seized the opportunity to get to know younger volunteers and pick their brains around what might inspire and motivate younger volunteers. Would this group like to share a little bit about what you learned? And my request is, would you mind picking up the microphone? Thank you.
Got it.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, we talked a little bit about engaging younger volunteers, which is something that like the organization that I work for like really has locked down. It's mostly engaging the adults that we're struggling with, but it's a student-led organization, so it's the students who are like in charge of doing the outreach and who are planning the trips and leading the trips and teaching the lessons and all of those things. So a lot of it comes down to it being a social experience for them. Yeah. All of our, 70 plus youth like staff, they call them, but they're volunteers, are all high school students that go to like the same high schools together. So they tend to like go on these trips because they want to hang out with their friends, and then they enjoy the trips. So they keep coming back, and then they get on staff because it's a way to keep coming back and contribute back to that experience. And then they get onto the executive committee and they start, being in charge of outreach and stuff like that because they just kind of like followed that pipeline through to volunteering.
But I hear affiliators, right, who want to be socially connected. Yep. I hear having a positive experience, but also having that leadership ladder where they're able to deepen their involvement and try out new things and continue with the organization. Yep. And they're having a positive experience. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of really wonderful things right.
They're doing a great job. And I think a big part of it too is that the teens know how to like do outreach to each other. Yep. So they know like how to post on like what social media sites, where and when and what about in order to reach their peers.
Interesting. So you're using both concentric circles, tapping into the youth networks, and then they are choosing, are they using marketing strategies or warm body recruitment techniques or speaking peer-to-peer, et cetera. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have to listen to an old guy telling them how to do it.
Any other ideas from this group? I feel like you touched on a lot there. Thank you, Grayson. Yay! And I understand the other team talked about, do you want me to repeat it? You talked about a social opportunity. Mallory and I were just talking about how there's some organizations that are more structured and it feels a little bit less fun, and it is great to think outside of the box. If people are tired of having Zoom calls, yes, let's go to the bar, let's have a beer, let's make some fun out of it. It doesn't have to be a boring, punch the clock type of volunteer opportunity. So I applaud you for drinking those beers. How about that? Any other ideas from that group? Yay, thank you.
I don't know that it was quite an idea, but I realized after we stopped that all of what we were talking about was starting with having more visibility to the communities. So as a kind of foray into people understanding that they could volunteer for us, just knowing that we exist. So a lot of our conversation revolved around having a presence.
Awesome. That's great. And there's a lot of different ways to have a presence and help people know about your organization. Certainly you could use marketing, social media and whatnot. We're going to talk in a little bit about recognition, and typically I say you don't need to spend a whole lot of money on recognition, but a way to recognize your volunteers is to give them a t-shirt, and then that's unpaid marketing on your organization's behalf, and then it is also fostering one-on-one conversations. Oh, what's that t-shirt all about? Well, I volunteer for them and I feel really good about it, and you should too. So that might be a good investment in terms of the paraphernalia for recognition. Thank you. How are folks feeling? It's 7:35. Do you need a 5-minute break, or should we just trudge through? I'm going to grab my pointer as you're deciding.
Who would like a break?
Okay,
let's take a break.
Let's do a 5-minute bio break at 7:41. We'll come back and go ahead and wrap it up. Okay, thank you everyone. You were so prompt. Everybody wants to get out of here. But the snacks are so good. Okay, so we're gonna somewhat quickly go through the last part of our, not life cycle of volunteer engagement, just so that I'm doing my due diligence and touching on all the different elements. But the next is about screening. And again, I've kind of tried to provide some encouragement to you that it is okay to say no. Start with yourself in terms of what you want and need from a volunteer, what strengths you want them to have. There's something that my boss used to always say, that strategy eats culture for breakfast, that 80% of how you show up is about your attitude, and it's 20% skills. So that the soft skills and the match is almost as important, if not more important sometimes, than having the technical skills. And so, making sure that that who you're bringing into the organization is going to be a good fit long term. It is healthy. It will make better use of their time, better use of your time, and again, make for a more positive experience overall. So that's my plug for screening. Just as a high level, there's a lot of different ways to screen volunteers, and as the last slide suggested, it starts from the moment someone inquires about an opportunity, or they can self-select out by reading the position description or reading the recruitment message, and then it starts to get into you asking questions to make sure that it's a good fit for what you're looking for and what the organization needs. But it's good to have a frame of reference, again, to think about what is it that our organization needs, and that goes back to the position description itself. But how do we operate as an organization? What are some of the norms that someone needs to be comfortable with within our organization to have a fulfilling experience? And maybe someone's looking for a different experience. Maybe they're totally type A and they want to slow down and be a little bit more organic, and that's perfectly fine. But at least naming that and having a conversation around it to make sure that it's a fit is a good idea. So we have this diagram here that frames things from the volunteer's perspective versus the organization's perspective. And you want to make sure that there's at least not misalignment between the two. It may not be a perfect fit, but you want to make sure that there's at least not misalignment. And a great example of this in an area where volunteers often screen themselves out is if they have different values about who they want to help, is it in alignment with your organization's mission? Maybe they only care about animals. They don't care about, social services. Well, if they're not willing to work with people, they don't care if people have basic needs, then it's probably not a good fit. But they probably won't come to you anyways because they will self-select themselves out of that equation. So don't really have to worry about that first one too much. But the second one, thinking about your organization's culture and what the volunteers' expectations are around how they're going to operate within that culture. In my world, I see a lot of corporate volunteers volunteering at nonprofits, and sometimes they have ideas about the number of resources that the organization might have to work with, or how quickly decisions should be made, or what an appropriate response time might be. And sometimes that's different from what the nonprofit culture or experience in reality is like. So being able to talk about what someone might be able to expect within your organization and what they're used to, and seeing if there's some give there, if there's a way to kind of come to a compromise or an agreement, or if that is something that may constitute a mismatch between you and this potential volunteer. In my head, I'm thinking about a previous deputy director that noted that we're an organization of introverts that recruit or that attracts introverts. Therefore, we are preventing from a diverse way of operating. So I may just take back what I just said, but anyway, it's food for thought. Another area, just as an example of what volunteers are expecting to do versus what you need a volunteer to do. Again, we talked about starting with yourself first. Sure, yes, it's good to be reasonable. It's good to see if you can compromise or meet a volunteer where they're at. If it is, if there are some times when you can do that and sometimes you can't. And so just a random example, if you have an organization that needs a graphic designer for a capital campaign, you probably want someone that is going to be able to take the ideas and give you something to react to, not need a ton of direction. They're going to be able to do it within a reasonable amount of time, not need a whole bunch of reworks, et cetera. So that may not be the time in which you work with a volunteer that's interested in getting more experience or is looking to develop their skills versus using skills that they already have. And so there's a time and a place, and it's just about being honest about, okay, what is the volunteer bringing to the table? Is that enough for what you need in this moment, or do you need deeper expertise or something else in order to fulfill the role, given what's going on within the organization? What are the resources you have to work with? What are the risks related to this role? What kind of oversight is going to be needed? That kind of thing. And then the last one, just being clear on, how a volunteer is expecting or wanting to engage and what's going to be possible within your organization. I think the pandemic brought wonderful opportunities for virtual volunteering to the sector. I think it is so much easier for us to serve organizations throughout the Pacific Northwest versus in regions where we have consultants physically living. But there's pros and cons to that. Some volunteers really want to be in person now. They miss having that human connection. Some people are still hibernating at home and don't want to move through time and space to get to an opportunity. And so just thinking through what is it that the organization needs? What is that structure? Do you need someone that's going to make a long-term commitment or even a 3 to 6 month commitment? Is this someone that is just looking to volunteer in between jobs? Are they a little bit of a flight risk? Is that going to work for you right now? Sometimes it might, and then sometimes you as an organization just may not have the bandwidth to level or to weather that kind of risk. So it's just a little bit of soul searching in terms of where are we at as an organization, what can we handle right now, and how far can we go to meet somebody where they're at, and then also asking the volunteer to do a little bit of self-discovery or articulation in terms of what is it that they really need to be successful in the role. Does that make sense? Okay. All kinds of different tricks and tips for screening. I won't go into that. What?
We have the mirror test.
Are you breathing?
Oh, are you breathing? Warm body. Are you willing to show up? Can you fog a mirror? Oh, keeping me on my toes. Thank you for the laugh. That's awesome. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, one of the things that for us is a pre-screening tool because in general, you already have to have your FCC license and/or
Yep.
FEMA service.
Yeah. That's great. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rush past it. We will send you the slides so that you have them.
I can still breathe.
You can still breathe. Recruitment in action. Yeah. And some organizations will use a lot of these different tools. It'd be an exhaustive process to go through all of that to volunteer. I think you have to kind of balance. It's not a bad idea to have volunteers jump through a few hoops to volunteer with your organization because it demonstrates commitment. They're not going to easily shy away from something that they are obviously willing to make the time for and invest their energy in. But the level of hoop jumping should be commiserate with the actual role that they're taking on. If you are just having someone show up at an event and staff the info booth, well, actually for that one, you might want to have an interview with them and make sure that they're good at talking with people and things like that. But you probably don't need to do a background check. You probably don't need to do a skills assessment. You may want to do some role plays and things like that, but you can kind of, use your judgment. And we've talked about this, just when you have a good match, when what the volunteer wants is in alignment with what you have to offer and what you need, that's the heart song, right? It is the joyful gift, the successful connection that you want to keep going. You don't want to take that for granted. You still want to check in with that volunteer on a regular basis. See how they're doing, ask for their advice, get their feedback in terms of what they've seen to be working well within the organization, what they've seen that you could possibly improve upon. Asking for their feedback is a way of recognizing their contributions and things like that. So you want to kind of still keep your finger on the pulse to make sure that they're happy, but investing energy and effort in that positive match is a more fruitful use of your time than trying to make that, square peg in a round hole work where it doesn't feel good for them, it doesn't feel good for you, ends up resulting in possible negative PR and so forth. So, orientation and training, it really depends on what you're asking a volunteer to do. Orientation is really just helping an organization understand your cause, kind of how your organization is set up, how they're going to work within that organization, how they fit in within that organization, who they can go to for support. And then training is making sure that they know how to do the jobs that they've been asked to do or that they've committed to do. And with training, you just want to make sure that you're offering a variety of different mediums, maybe checking in with people about how do you best learn, not talking at them for an hour and a half like I've been doing, but maybe offering them, you can read some things, you can listen to some things, you can talk to peers about some things. A great way of making sure that someone is up to speed on what you need to have them do is to have them shadow someone who's been doing it for a while. It's a way of honoring the person that has been doing it for a while, that they know what they're doing and they know how to do it well enough to be a mentor to someone else. But then it gives that new person time to kind of feel it within the organization, to demonstrate it, to master it, so that you can feel confident about them going out and doing it on their own after the fact. And then supervision is always a bit tricky. I think sometimes we feel uncomfortable supervising our peers or providing feedback to someone that's giving of their time and energy. We hesitate to be anything but grateful. I think a couple things to keep in mind is that oftentimes volunteers are wanting professional development or wanting feedback. Those affiliators are wanting to be liked. They don't want to do the wrong thing. Influencers, want to be heard. The achievers want to be able to figure things out themselves. And so it's not like we need to go in and correct volunteers all the time if we see something that is going awry. But think about who the human being is that you have in front of you and offer support. We want to make sure that we are, empowering them to do their roles well and offering guidance and support to help them be successful in those roles. So thinking about the person, even asking how they might like to receive feedback, or would they like different ideas versus jumping in. So you don't have to shy away from giving feedback in real time, but just think about how you can do it in a respectful and way that honors their contributions versus has them shut down. Yeah.
Just one thing that we encounter
Yeah.
And I think the subset of that, from my take, is who can they be and who can they become in the organization?
That's beautiful. So if people didn't hear that, he was talking about how a lot of volunteers, or some volunteers, are looking for a sense of purpose, and so looking at who they could be and who they could become as part of this experience. And so this, I'm assuming you're kind of referencing that this gives them a growth opportunity. Is that?
And it's not constrained at all because you basically take all ideas and push them around. So
Yeah.
that's the chagrin of our operations.
Has anyone else had other experiences with giving feedback to volunteers or redirecting things that have gone awry in a way that has been positive and has felt good to both of you? I feel like there are trainings that are like days long about supervision. So it's not always what we sign up for.
The best point you made was is you have to recognize what the volunteers, they're like, oh, you got to be a puppy dog, I'm going to have to pet you every day.
That's a great point. Just being really mindful of what people's expectations are. I mean, if you do have someone that, again, really wants to be liked and wants to know that they're doing a good job, they're going to need more frequent praise and recognition than someone's like, just let me figure this out. Like, don't coddle me. Like, get off my back, right? You don't want to hover.
It's okay to alter what they're doing. When I have volunteers come to the park to help me pull stuff we do.
So giving people choice and autonomy in terms of how they're completing their task and finding something that's meaningful to them. I think that's perfect. Alternatives.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, Kevin.
I don't know if this counts as a...
Permission not to be perfect. That's powerful, right? As people that want to be helpful and like that feeling and have something to give, that you don't have to do it all, and helping people create boundaries for themselves and recognize their limits to prevent burnout. That's amazing. I think that's great. Awesome.
Also, I think what
Yeah.
Kevin just shared and what you mentioned about carry the water a little bit.
That's a great way of framing it. It's kind of creating space at the table, that giving opportunities for other people to get experience within the organization, and that maybe they can lead something and help someone else get involved. Yeah, as a way to spread the love a little bit. That's great. Thank you. How are we doing on time? It is 8 o'clock. We're going to wrap this up. What was that? Oh.
I just had a comment of the burnout thing made me think of it, when it's time.
And people can always make another commitment for another term, but having that touch point to ask the question, how are you doing? Is this the right thing for you? Yeah, are you still feeling energized by this? Because you want to catch people before they're totally done and have no energy to give in terms of onboarding the next person, right? So I think that's great. Yeah, begging the question, even if they say yes. How are people feeling? Are you ready to go? Do you want me to cut this off and send you the slides, or just power through for like 5 more minutes? I will not be offended if folks need to head home to whatever it is that they need to head home to. It's a lot of me talking and listening as well. The basic point I have here is that, and I mentioned it before, is that you don't have to spend a ton of money on recognition. It's really, again, about understanding what is going to feel good to your volunteer. Some people like the big certificate that's presented in front of a large crowd. Some people would just coil within themselves and never want to show up at your event again. Some people enjoy going to the event to connect with each other. Some people just like being asked, but never would have an intention of showing up. And so you can end up spending a lot of money. I think just the perception that people have the opportunity to be thanked is good, but better yet is understanding, what would be meaningful to people. Is it a call from a board member? Is it just personal recognition of the unique thing that they did that made a difference within your organization that day? Is it, again, different leadership opportunities within the organization, being showcased as someone that has done a really good job and can be a mentor to other volunteers? Is it asking for their advice in terms of how to do things? There's lots of ways to recognize people that cost $0. So if you're worried about your budget, you can rest assured with that particular piece. And then evaluation, real quick, it's just, again, a good hygiene thing to get into, to be intentional about checking in with your volunteers, at least on an annual basis, to see what worked for them, what they would recommend in terms of improvements. Self-reflection is a great learning opportunity for people, especially if you have outlined what the expectations are ahead of time and what you're looking for in volunteers, and then ask them to reflect upon how they showed up. They can learn about themselves, and most people think that they're doing a great job, even if you ask the questions. But we hope that it fosters learning and just a reminder of what some of those core values are that the organization is asking for. It is always great to do exit interviews with your volunteers. People will be more candid in that moment when they're on their way out the door than when they are still going to have to sit next to you the next day. So don't miss that opportunity. It is a great way. Maybe you may not be able to retain that person. Maybe you can still turn them around. And maybe they're leaving for benign reasons that have nothing to do with the experience. But it is a great, candid way of learning how you can improve your program for other volunteers. So it's a great moment to seize on. And then the last thing here is not forgetting to ask people within your organization, whether they're paid or unpaid, who are working with volunteers, how the program is working for them. Some organizations have decentralized volunteer programs where everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and some organizations have one person managing the volunteers, and they're feel somewhat responsible for serving the needs of other programs and whatnot. But it's good to know if it's working, especially if you're not getting engagement from other folks that are working with volunteers. Finding out why, like what would help them, how would they feel more confident in their role in terms of working with volunteers, how would they come up with more volunteer opportunities, what kind of support do they need to be successful in engaging volunteers. Because if they're happy and doing a good job, chances are your volunteers will be happier and continue doing a good job, and it makes your life easier. So kind of keeping that two-way or three-way or four-way, whatever it is, conversations going is always a good idea. Any questions about all of that? What was that? Interesting. Metrics for volunteer management. Metrics are kind of complicated because you look at what the organization's ultimate goal is and then try to figure out what will tell the story of your organization's ability to be able to achieve that goal. And there's not always a direct correlation between what you're doing and the direct impact that tells that story. But metrics for the volunteer program, you can, a lot of organizations report out on volunteer hours. That's an important thing for matching grants and just understanding what the contributions are of volunteers to your organization. I forget off the top of my head what the hourly value is, but the independent sector is a national entity that defines the value of a volunteer hour on an annual basis. It may be in like $40.87 is the volunteer hour. I don't think I get paid $40.87 an hour, so paid more to volunteer, which is great. But that can be reflected as an in-kind donation to the organization in terms of time and service. And so hours, the financial value of that, and then just asking questions, would you refer a friend to volunteer with this organization? Or I felt supported in my role and have, strongly disagree. I feel like I was able to make a positive difference in the community as a result of volunteering with this organization. So you can kind of tell the story in terms of how volunteers are feeling about their experience through those kinds of questions. That's a good question, though. I forgot about the independent sector thing. Thank you. Ringer over here. At 8 o'clock. Anything else? You all have been so great to be here tonight and to indulge me and sharing about volunteer management and all your great questions. And I appreciate you taking the time to think about volunteerism and how to enhance it within your organization. So thank you. I will send the slide deck to Mallory. I'll send some links to resources on our website. They're up here, but I'm not going to worry about. This is what our volunteer management guide looks like on our website, and you can find tools and resources under every link. And then there's some other platforms that are helpful to take a look at. But feel free to email me with questions if you have them. It's just Jan, like Brady Bunch Jan at 501commons.org. Happy to chat. And I just wish you well in terms of getting and engaging and keeping the volunteers that you need. Thanks, everybody.